When I was growing up, I always remembered Election Day as the day we got off of school. Those were the days I looked forward to, and I wanted those days more than anything else. But they were never anything more than an excuse not to go to school. Skip forward to my 18th birthday. 18 means a few exciting things. You can buy scratch tickets, you can buy cigarettes, and you can vote. I went out right away to buy a scratch ticket, only not to be carded, something very disappointing for an 18-year-old. But still, voting wasn't a big deal for me. During this time, Donald Trump had announced that he was going to run for president. I know that I, for one, had never believed it would actually happen. I looked on Twitter and I saw the online universe making a joke about him. There was no way he was serious, because what did he know about politics? Looking back, I realized this is where it all began. Election time begins to roll around and I've registered to vote. But still, nothing really sinks in with me of how important what I'm doing really is. So I got my absentee ballot and I voted. Fast forward again to October, a month before Election Day. Hillary Clinton is the Democratic nominee and Donald Trump is the Republican. Debate after debate, Clinton seems to be the obvious winner, at least to me. In a state of disbelief, I watched as a possible future president of our nation evoke fear and intimidation. Election night, I stayed up and sat in shock as the results started coming in. Trump was winning. On November 10th, when the results were announced officially, people woke up in a state of fear. Fear of when their loved ones would get harassed next. Fear on if their legal right to marry was going to be taken away. Fearing for their safety simply because of the color of their skin. This fear sounds all too familiar to the fear felt by African Americans of the 19th century. Fear of waking up and experiencing hate crimes because of the color of your skin. Countless numbers of people are gathering to raise their voice in protest against the prospect of a country run by hate. They can argue that change is good, and I agree that change is good, but bullying and belittling is not. And that's what President-elect Donald Trump is doing and encouraging. By encouraging violence amongst his fans, Trump is creating an unsafe country, taking us back in history when people feared for their lives simply by walking down the street. The next president of the United States, someone who would go down in history books with men like George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and Abraham Lincoln, is someone who belittles, disrespects, and harasses others around him to put himself ahead. And maybe most frustrating of all for me was his blatant disrespect for women, including overt sexual harassment and comments degrading women's intelligence and appearance. Those comments are careless. They are crude and mean and disrespectful, and that was what our next president of the United States has said and done. In the anger I felt post-election, I thought more deeply about actually voting itself. I thought about how people have a voice, and people use their voice to decide their own future. I had registered to vote without even thinking about it, without even realizing the significance of what I was doing. I was given the opportunity to vote, something women had to fight centuries for. Only when the 19th Amendment was passed in 1919 and ratified in 1920 were women granted the right to vote. Before that, women had fought and spoke up for decades, struggling for the right to even be heard. Looking back at the 19th century, a time full of fighting for civil, basic human rights, not only were women not allowed to vote, but neither were men of color. Frederick Douglass advocated for women's rights, as well as rights of African Americans. Women waited years upon years to vote, and I had registered to vote and voted without even thinking about all the women who had to fight for me to be able to do that. Having a black president, followed by an election with a female nominee who held a party seat, is groundbreaking. People have waited years for this moment. We can see in this election a vision of dark times to come. We look and we see thousands of people struggling for the right to vote, due to hundreds of voting places being closed down, leaving lines of 5+ hours full of people who didn't have time to wait. Because of this, black voter turnout significantly decreased. We pride ourselves on being a democratic country and giving each individual the right to advocate and vote for themselves. Yet post-election 2016, women are worried more than ever about their reproductive rights. While men are exercising their right to be their own advocate and voice their own opinions and do what they believe will be best for themselves, they are undermining women's ability to do the same. By threatening to overturn Roe v. Wade, Trump is jeopardizing women's right to make choices regarding her own body. How can we live in a country where people fight for their own freedom to vote and decide on how their future unfolds, but force their own opinion on women who are just trying to do the same. Living through this election has been eye-opening. It is a fear that gets me the most. Why should my friends worry about being able to marry the people they love, simply because the person they love is the same sex as them? Why should my friends and I have to worry about our reproductive rights? Why should someone be afraid to walk down the street simply because of their race or religion? This was not the president I voted for, and this was not how I wanted my first election to go.